This is the first part of 3 videos in a complete series that you have never seen before. Throughout the centuries, few biblical characters have sparked as much fascination and speculation as the enigmatic Magi from the East. Appearing in only a dozen verses in the Gospel of Matthew, these mysterious men arrive in Jerusalem guided by a star, ask King Herod about the birth of the King of the Jews, and, after finding the child Jesus, offer symbolic gifts before vanishing from the sacred text as suddenly as they appeared. But who were they, really? This is a question that has crossed cultures, eras, and religious traditions. Were they kings, as Christian tradition later sang? Astronomers from ancient Babylon? Zoroastrian priests? Foreign prophets guided by God? Or merely symbolic figures representing humanity's quest for divine truth? The goal of this video is to dive deep into this mystery. We will analyze the biblical accounts and later traditions, examine the historical context, explore archaeological and cultural evidence, investigate linguistic roots and symbolic elements, and above all, seek to understand what this unexpected visit reveals about the broader message of Christ's birth. Why, among the people of Israel, so accustomed to messianic prophecies, was it foreigners from the East who recognized the birth of the Savior? What does this apparent contradiction mean? And what does it say about how God communicates with the world? The figure of the Magi is not merely a historical enigma, but also a mirror of our own spiritual journey. They represent seekers, individuals who look to the heavens for signs, who interpret symbols, and who act on faith, courage, and wisdom. In essence, they are pilgrims of truth, crossing borders and facing dangers driven by something greater: the hope of encountering the promised Messiah. From the early Christian communities to the present day, the story of the Magi has been reinterpreted, adapted, and retold in many ways. In Western tradition, they received names: Gaspar, Melchior, and Balthazar, and were transformed into kings representing the 3 known continents of the time: Europe, Asia, and Africa. Their gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh, came to symbolize profound aspects of Christ's mission. Their image lives on in nativity scenes, carols, and Christmas legends. But does this match what Matthew truly meant? In this video, we will organize our exploration into thematic chapters, each dedicated to a different facet of this fascinating narrative. We will explore the origin of the word Magi and its meaning in the ancient world, the political, religious, and cultural context at the time of Jesus' birth, the role of stars and astronomy in ancient societies, the theological significance of the gifts they offered, the transformation of the Magi within Christian traditions across the centuries, possible connections with other cultures, religions, and spiritual paths. This video does not intend to solve the mystery once and for all, but rather to deepen it in an intelligent and respectful way. Our purpose is not to provide easy answers, but to open paths of reflection, where history and spirituality intersect. We will connect past and present, theology and science, scripture and culture, always with an investigative mindset, but also with reverence for the mysteries of faith. And why does this matter? Because the Magi from the East still have something to teach us. They show us that truth can be sought in many ways, that God speaks through symbols, and that it is possible to find light even on unconventional paths. They remind us that one doesn't need to be inside religious structures to recognize the sacred, and that sometimes it's from the outside that the purest reverence comes. In the end, the question is not just who were the Magi from the East, but also, who are we before the King who was born? Are we searching? Are we willing to follow the signs, even if they lead us into the unknown? So, fasten your curiosity, prepare your investigative spirit, and come with me on this revealing journey. The story that begins with a star might just end with a transformation in how you understand the Bible and yourself. The story of the Magi from the East is found in only one of the 4 canonical Gospels, the Gospel according to Matthew, specifically, chapter 2, verses 1 to 12. This brief narrative is packed with symbolism, political tension, and theological depth that has challenged interpreters for centuries. Let's begin with the passage in the English Standard Version, ESV. Now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, "Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." Matthew 2 verses 1 to 2. From the very beginning, the narrative surprises us. Matthew, a gospel primarily aimed at Jewish readers, introduces foreign Gentiles, Magi from the East, as the first to recognize Jesus as the King of the Jews. This is no small detail. In a world divided between Jews and Gentiles, the author is already pointing to the universal nature of salvation. The term used in the original Greek is Magi, derived from the Persian magus, referring to a caste of priests in the ancient Median and Persian empires. These Magi were known for their study of the stars, interpretation of dreams, and spiritual insight. In other contexts, the word could also refer to sorcerers or charlatans, like Simon the Magus in Acts 8 verse 9. However, in Matthew's account, the word is clearly used with dignity. These are not illusionists, but respected sages, students of the heavens, who interpreted an extraordinary celestial event as a sign of a royal birth. The narrative continues. When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him, and assembling all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. Matthew 2 verses 3 to 4. Herod, known for his paranoia and cruelty, interprets the Magi's question as a direct threat to his rule. Upon hearing that they were searching for a king of the Jews, his fear intensifies, as any messianic figure could incite unrest and challenge his power. Notably, the Jewish religious leaders knew the answer. They quote Micah 5 verse 2, confirming that the Messiah would be born in Bethlehem. Yet none of them take action. This contrast is striking. Those who knew the scriptures did nothing, while foreigners, guided by a star, set out in faith. And behold, the star that they had seen when it rose went before them until it came to rest over the place where the child was. Matthew 2 verse 9. Here, the star reappears in a supernatural manner. It moves and stops over a specific location, indicating that it may not have been a natural astronomical phenomenon, but rather a divine sign. It guides the Magi directly to Jesus, now no longer in a manger, but in a house, as verse 11 indicates. And going into the house, they saw the child with Mary his mother, and they fell down and worshipped him. Then, opening their treasures, they offered him gifts: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Matthew 2 verse 11. This moment is loaded with theological meaning. 3 foreigners bow before a child in a humble home and worship him. This scene fulfills Old Testament prophecies such as Isaiah 60 verse 3 and Psalm 72 verses 10 to 11, which speak of nations bringing gifts to the Anointed One. As we will explore in more detail in chapter 6, the gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh, have deep spiritual symbolism, foreshadowing aspects of Christ's kingship, divinity, and future suffering. And being warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed to their own country by another way. Matthew 2 verse 12. The dream they receive reflects divine intervention and spiritual sensitivity. Their choice not to return to Herod not only protects the child, but reveals where their loyalty lies, not with earthly kings, but with the God who reveals himself in dreams. It is interesting to note that Mark, Luke, and John do not mention the Magi at all. Luke, for instance, offers another perspective on the birth of Jesus, featuring angels and shepherds, but says nothing about a star or foreign sages. This raises theological and literary questions. Why does Matthew include this narrative? Most scholars agree that Matthew seeks to show that Jesus was recognized by Gentiles before his own people, setting the tone for the universal mission of Christ, and for the inclusion of the nations in God's plan. The story of the Magi in Matthew is brief, yet rich in layers. In a few verses, it weaves together prophecy, cosmology, political power, and spiritual revelation. It shows that divine truth can be recognized by those outside the covenant, those who, without scriptures, follow the signs of heaven. It also presents a piercing contrast. The religious elite, who knew the prophecy, did nothing. But foreigners, with limited knowledge, acted in faith. The Magi teach us that to find the king, we must sometimes leave what is familiar, follow a sign we barely understand, and have the humility to bow down before the divine, even when he comes in the form of a child. To understand the story of the Magi from the East, it is essential to examine the historical and political landscape at the time of Jesus' birth. This context not only enhances our understanding of who the Magi might have been, but also reveals the broader implications of their journey to Bethlehem. At the time of Jesus' birth, the world was under the shadow of two major powers: the Roman Empire in the west and the Parthian Empire in the east. These two empires represented not only geographic boundaries but also cultural, religious, and military spheres of influence. Rome dominated Judea, where Herod the Great governed as a vassal king. Known for his architectural achievements and ruthless paranoia, Herod maintained power by aligning with Rome, particularly with Emperor Augustus. His rule was marked by fear, political manipulation, and a brutal desire to eliminate any threat to his throne. To the east of the Roman domain lay the Parthian Empire, which encompassed modern-day Iran and parts of Iraq, Armenia, and Central Asia. The Parthians had inherited much of the Persian culture and continued many of the Zoroastrian priestly traditions, including astronomy, dream interpretation, and religious rituals, precisely the types of knowledge associated with the Magi. This east-west dynamic is crucial to understanding why the arrival of Magi in Jerusalem would have alarmed Herod so deeply. These weren't just curious travelers. They likely represented the intellectual and religious elite of a rival empire. A key historical event must be noted here. Just a few decades before Jesus' birth, in 40 BCE, the Parthians invaded Judea and installed Antigonus as king. Herod fled during this invasion but later returned with Roman support to reclaim his throne in 37 BCE. The memory of this invasion would still have been fresh at the time of the Magi's arrival. The Parthians were not just theoretical enemies. They had previously taken Jerusalem by force. So, imagine the scene from Herod's perspective. Learned men from the east, possibly from the same culture that once dethroned him, arrive in his capital asking about the birth of a new king of the Jews. It's no wonder Herod, and all Jerusalem with him, were disturbed. Their presence could have been interpreted as the first signal of political rebellion, or even as a diplomatic threat. Their very question posed a challenge to the legitimacy of Herod's rule, and by extension, Rome's control. In addition to the political tension, it is important to understand the religious atmosphere in Judea at the time. Many Jews were deeply familiar with the messianic prophecies in books like Isaiah, Micah, and Daniel. There was a widespread expectation that a deliverer would soon arise, a descendant of David who would liberate Israel from foreign oppression and restore the kingdom of God. This messianic hope had both spiritual and nationalistic dimensions. Some groups, like the Essenes, believed in a coming spiritual redeemer. Others, like the Zealots, awaited a political and military leader. Therefore, any rumor about the birth of a new king would be immediately connected to messianic prophecy, and would raise alarms in both political and religious circles. Ironically, it was not the priests or scribes who detected the sign, but Gentile sages from the east. This irony is at the heart of Matthew's narrative. In the ancient world, the East, especially Babylon and Persia, was associated with wisdom, science, and spirituality. Even among the Greeks and Romans, Eastern sages were admired for their mystical knowledge. The Magi, therefore, represented not just foreigners, but a prestigious and respected class of knowledge-bearers. Their arrival in Jerusalem likely caused both admiration and fear. They came not as military envoys, but as interpreters of the stars. And yet, their presence evoked political tremors, precisely because the spiritual and the political were deeply intertwined in the ancient world. In that sense, the star they followed was not only celestial, it was also symbolic of a divine plan unfolding in human history, transcending empires and ideologies. When Matthew tells us that the Magi came from the east, he is not only indicating a geographic direction. He is making a theological statement. The light of the world was recognized not by those closest to the temple, but by those beyond its walls. Not by Rome, nor by Jerusalem's elite, but by seekers from foreign lands. And when they arrive, they find not a prince in a palace, but a child in a humble house. The message could not be clearer. God is rewriting expectations. He is subverting power structures. He is revealing truth not through might, but through humility, not through the empire, but through a child born in obscurity. The historical and political context of the Magi's journey reveals much more than background information. It unveils the tension between divine revelation and worldly power. It shows that God's signs often come through unexpected channels, that spiritual insight may arise from those outside institutional religion, and that recognizing truth requires humility, courage, and a willingness to follow the light, even when it leads across enemy lines. The Magi, in their long journey through dangerous territories, remind us that faith sometimes demands crossing borders, not just geographic, but also cultural, mental, and spiritual. One of the most captivating elements of the story of the Magi is undoubtedly the star that led them. Described by Matthew as a celestial sign that rose in the east and later stopped over the place where the child was, the Star of Bethlehem has fascinated theologians, astronomers, historians, and artists for centuries. But what exactly was this star? Was it a natural astronomical phenomenon? Or was it a supernatural event, beyond the laws of physics? This chapter seeks to explore the possibilities, both scientific and symbolic, behind this mysterious light. Matthew 2 verse 2 says, "We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." And later, in verse 9, "And behold, the star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was." There are two details here that challenge any simplistic explanation. The star moves, guiding them not just from afar, but leading them from Jerusalem to Bethlehem. The star stops, something that normal stars and planets do not do in the sky from the perspective of an observer on Earth. This suggests that the phenomenon observed by the Magi was not merely a fixed celestial object, but a sign, a guided event, with movement, timing, and purpose. Despite these supernatural elements, many researchers have tried to identify natural phenomena that could explain what the Magi saw. Among the most popular hypotheses are 1. Conjunctions of planets. One of the most supported theories is the triple conjunction between Jupiter and Saturn in the constellation of Pisces in the year 7 BC. From the Earth's perspective, these planets appeared very close in the sky on 3 occasions in the same year. This was a rare event and could have carried symbolic meaning. Jupiter, the king of planets, often associated with royalty. Saturn, linked to the protection of the Jews by some ancient astrologers. Pisces, a constellation associated with Israel in some traditions. This rare alignment could have been interpreted by the Magi, experts in celestial symbolism, as a sign of the birth of a divine king in Judea. 2. A supernova or nova. Some scholars suggest that a nova, a stellar explosion visible for weeks or months, could explain a bright, temporary object in the sky. Chinese records from around 5 BC mention an unusual bright object in the sky, which some interpret as a nova. 3. A comet. Another possibility is a comet. Comets were often seen as omens in antiquity, though usually of misfortune. However, their movement across the sky and the way they appear and fade could resemble Matthew's description. But no comet matching this timing appears clearly in surviving records from the region. Despite scientific theories, many theologians emphasize that Matthew's description doesn't align neatly with any known astronomical behavior. A star that leads, changes direction, and stops over a specific house does not behave like a natural object. This leads some scholars to suggest that the Star of Bethlehem was a supernatural phenomenon, similar to the pillar of fire that guided the Israelites through the wilderness, Exodus 13 verse 21. In this view, the star is not simply a light in the sky, but a manifestation of divine guidance. It's important to note that Matthew never calls it a star in the scientific sense we use today. The Greek word aster can refer to any luminous object in the sky, including a planet, a comet, or a symbolic light. In this light, the star functions as a theological symbol, a sign of revelation to the Gentiles, a light shining in the darkness, a fulfillment of messianic prophecies such as Numbers 2400 hours 17. A star shall come out of Jacob, and a scepter shall rise out of Israel. The Magi were likely experts in astronomy and astrology, fields not separated in ancient times. For them, the sky was a sacred text, a canvas on which the gods revealed their intentions. Celestial movements were not random. They were messages to be interpreted. When the Magi saw the star, they understood it not just as a marvel, but as a message, and they acted on it. This detail is crucial. They not only saw a sign, they followed it. This makes the star a symbol of divine communication, but also of human response to revelation. Today, in a world dominated by scientific thinking, we often try to reduce the mystery of the star to something explainable. But perhaps its true power lies in its inexplicability. The star doesn't need to conform to the laws of physics. It needs only to fulfill its role in the narrative, to reveal the divine to those who seek. Whether it was a planetary alignment, a supernatural light, or a unique cosmic event, the important thing is what it caused. A journey of faith, a search for truth, a humble encounter with the divine. The star that guided the Magi continues to shine in the imagination of believers and scholars alike. Its exact nature may remain a mystery, but its spiritual meaning is clear. God speaks, sometimes through the stars. And those who look up, those who pay attention, may still hear the call. The story of the star is not just about astronomy. It's about spiritual perception. It's about a universe where God speaks through signs, and a people willing to listen, walk, and believe.